And as you can see, my strategy increased client retention by 32%. Derek Walsh didn't even glance my way when he said it. He stood at the head of the glass-walled boardroom, remote in hand, clicking through my slides. My charts, my language, my calculations that took 3 months to perfect. Every late night I'd spent building that model was now being claimed as his brilliant strategy. Heat rushed to my face. My chest tightened like someone was squeezing it. Around the mahogany table, executives nodded slowly. Pens scratched against notepads. Approval hummed through the air like electricity. The VP of Operations leaned forward with interest. The CFO made a note in her folder. I sat 10 feet away, hands folded in my lap, smiling politely while my career was being stolen in real time. My stomach twisted into knots, but I kept my face neutral. Professional. Calm. Everything I'd been taught to be. My fingernails dug into my leather portfolio hard enough to leave marks. The binding creaked slightly under the pressure. Don't react. Don't say anything. Not here. Not now. Derek's voice stayed smooth and confident. Practiced. Like he'd rehearsed this presentation in the mirror for hours. He gestured at my risk assessment chart, explaining concepts I'd developed from scratch. He used phrases I'd written in my documentation, word for word. I forced myself to breathe slowly. In through my nose, out through my mouth. My pulse hammered in my ears. Across the table, our CEO, Victoria Cross, leaned back in her executive chair. Her expression was unreadable. Not impressed, not bored, just watching. Measuring. Her sharp eyes moved from Derek to the slides, then back again. Then she spoke, and the room temperature seemed to drop 5 degrees. All right, Victoria said calmly, her voice cutting through Derek's momentum like a knife. Before we move on to the next section, I have a quick question. The room went completely still. Even the air conditioning seemed to quiet down. Derek paused mid-gesture, remote still pointed at the screen. Of course, he said, flashing his practiced smile. Victoria's eyes stayed locked on him. Can you walk us through how you validated the risk model assumptions, specifically the methodology behind the variance calculations? The question hung in the air like smoke. Derek blinked, just once. Fast. It was small, almost invisible to everyone else. But I saw it. I saw the split second of panic flash across his face before his expression smoothed over again. I saw his jaw tighten. I saw his grip on the remote shift slightly. Because that was my model, my methodology, my validation process. And Derek had absolutely no idea how it worked. The assumptions were, he cleared his throat, buying time. They were based on comprehensive team input and industry standards. It was a politician's answer. Vague, general, empty. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. She tilted her head slightly. Which specific inputs? Derek's smile tightened at the corners. Well, as you know, these models involve multiple data points. The team collaborated extensively on the framework. He was drowning, using more words to say less. Classic deflection. I kept my eyes forward, my face blank. But inside, one thought pounded through my head like a drumbeat. What the hell is happening right now? Around the table, I could feel the energy changing. People were paying attention differently now. Sharper. More focused. The VP of Operations stopped taking notes and just watched. My name is Anna Mitchell. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last 7 years doing exactly what high-performing women are taught to do. Work hard, stay professional, keep your head down, let your results speak for themselves. I joined Blackstone Analytics, straight out of a smaller consulting firm, hungry to prove myself. The company was prestigious, competitive, and exactly where I wanted to be. I threw myself into every project, stayed late, came in early. I learned fast and delivered faster. Derek became my manager 2 years into my time there. He was 42, charismatic, well-connected. Everyone liked him. He knew how to work a room, how to make people feel important. At first, I was grateful to have him as a mentor. That gratitude lasted about 6 months. That's when the pattern began. So subtle, I almost missed it. The first time it happened, I didn't even realize what was going on. I'd shared an idea during our weekly one-on-one meeting. A new approach to client segmentation that could improve our targeting accuracy. Derek had seemed interested, asked thoughtful questions, praised my creativity. 2 weeks later, in a department meeting with 15 people, Derek presented a new strategic direction for client targeting that sounded eerily familiar. My approach, my framework, my exact methodology. but reworded just enough, repackaged as leadership direction. No mention of where the idea originated. When I brought it up privately afterward, Derek smiled warmly. Anna, these ideas come from collaborative discussions. I'm synthesizing input from the whole team. That's what leadership does. I told myself I was being too sensitive, too defensive. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's just how organizations work. I wasn't being sensitive, I was being erased. Over the next year, I became Derek's secret weapon. The person he leaned on when deadlines loomed and pressure mounted. The one who stayed until midnight fixing his mistakes and filling in his knowledge gaps. You're so reliable, Anna, he'd say during our private meetings. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're absolutely critical to this team's success. The praise felt good. It felt like recognition. But publicly, in meetings with senior leadership, my name disappeared. My contributions became team efforts, or department initiatives, or strategic direction from leadership. I was the ghostwriter of my own career. My presentations became his presentations. My analysis became his insights. My late nights became his promotions. I watched him climb higher while I stayed exactly where I was, doing more work for the same title. And I kept telling myself this was temporary, that eventually my work would be noticed. This latest project was different. It wasn't just another assignment I could let slide into Derek's portfolio. If it succeeded, it meant visibility with the executive team, real recognition, a possible promotion to senior analyst, financial stability, the respect I'd been chasing for years. If it didn't succeed or if my contribution vanished again, I'd stay invisible. Just another mid-level analyst whose name no one remembered. Another face in department photos. I couldn't afford invisible anymore. I was 36, watching younger colleagues with better connections leap past me. My salary hadn't increased meaningfully in 3 years. My career had plateaued while Derek soared. This project was my line in the sand. I just didn't know it yet. The client retention model had been my idea from the start, born from months of pattern recognition and data analysis that I did on my own time. I built the risk model after midnight on weeknights, fueled by coffee and determination. I ran the numbers twice, then 3 times. I verified every assumption against historical data. I documented every decision, every calculation, every source. Not because I suspected Derek would steal it, but because precision was my habit, my training, the way I'd always worked. I kept detailed notes, tracked version histories, saved every email. It was just who I was as a professional. I presented the framework to Derek on a Tuesday morning. He'd seemed genuinely impressed, asked smart questions, praised the thoroughness. He even suggested I present it to leadership myself. You deserve the recognition for this, Anna, he'd said, looking me straight in the eye. This is senior-level work. Really exceptional. For 48 hours, I believed him. I prepared my presentation, rehearsed my talking points, even bought a new blazer for the boardroom meeting. Then, Friday morning came. Change of plans, Derek said casually, catching me at my desk. I'm going to present the model on Monday. You'll be there, of course, but I think it makes more sense coming from management level. The executives respond better to director-level presentations. My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. I see. Don't worry, he added with that warm smile. I'll make sure to mention the team's contributions. This is great work, Anna, really impressive. A coworker named Brenda had warned me 6 months earlier. She'd pulled me aside after a meeting, her voice quiet and careful. Be careful with Derek, she'd said, glancing around to make sure no one heard. He has a tendency to summarize other people's work, if you know what I mean. I'd laughed it off. Derek was my mentor, my manager. Surely she was exaggerating. Maybe she'd had a personal conflict with him. That laugh cost me 6 months of denial. 6 months of making excuses. 6 months of being complicit in my own erasure. Back in the boardroom, Derek cleared his throat. The silence stretched uncomfortably. The assumptions were validated through standard industry practices, he said, his voice just slightly less confident than before. We cross-referenced with benchmark data and applied conservative estimates to minimize risk exposure. It sounded good if you didn't know what you were listening for. Corporate speak. Buzzwords. Nothing specific. Victoria's expression remained neutral, but I noticed her fingers drumming once against her notepad. And the variance calculations? Derek's pause was half a second too long. The variance methodology incorporated multiple standard deviation measurements across the dataset. Also technically correct. Also completely vague. He was describing what variance calculations were, not how the specific model worked. I didn't look at Derek. I kept my eyes forward, my hands steady in my lap. But I could feel him starting to sweat. Something changed in the room's energy. Not outrage, not drama, just a shift in attention. The CFO's pen stopped moving. The VP of Operations leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. Two other executives exchanged quick glances. They weren't angry. They were interested, curious, waiting to see what would happen next. And that was far more dangerous for Derek than any confrontation would have been. Victoria let the silence hang for another moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you. Please continue." Derek exhaled slightly, his shoulders dropping an inch. He clicked to the next slide and resumed his presentation, but the smoothness was gone. His rhythm was off. He stumbled over a word, corrected himself too quickly, and laughed when nothing was funny. I sat, perfectly still, my heart pounding against my ribs. What just happened? Did Victoria know? Was she testing him? The meeting continued for another 20 minutes, but the tone had shifted. Derek rushed through the remaining slides, his confidence cracking at the edges. After the meeting ended, Derek caught my arm in the hallway outside the boardroom. "That went well," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. His grip on my arm was just firm enough to feel controlling. "Good work on supporting the presentation." I looked at his hand on my arm, then up at his face. I didn't say anything. "Exactly." He released my arm. "You're a team player, Anna. That's valuable." He paused, his tone shifting slightly. "Next time, if you want credit for something, you should speak up during the meeting. Don't wait for someone else to mention your contributions." The audacity of it hit me like cold water. He stole my work, presented it as his own, and now he was suggesting I should have interrupted him to claim it. I smiled politely. "Noted." He nodded, satisfied, and walked away toward his office. Inside my chest, something hardened, something shifted and crystallized into pure clarity. I didn't confront him. I didn't send angry emails or demand meetings with HR or make dramatic declarations. I organized. That afternoon, I went home and pulled every file related to the project, every draft, every email, every version history, every timestamp showing when I'd created, edited, and finalized each component. I created a timeline documenting the project's development. I saved Derek's emails praising my work, asking for my input, requesting my expertise. I captured screenshots of shared files showing my authorship. I stopped being hopeful and started being precise. Strategic. Deliberate. For 7 years, I'd believed that good work spoke for itself, that eventually merit would be recognized, that staying quiet and professional would be rewarded. I was done believing that. If Derek wanted to take credit for my work, he'd have to explain how he created documents I'd authored. He'd have to explain emails where he'd asked me questions about methodologies he now claimed to have developed. I wasn't looking for revenge, I was building evidence. 2 weeks later, Derek did it again. This time, it was a client presentation for a major account renewal. I'd spent a month developing a retention strategy that identified high-risk accounts and recommended personalized intervention approaches. Derek presented it to the client himself. He used my slides, my recommendations, my language. Same confidence, same theft, different audience. The client loved it, renewed their contract for 3 more years, increased their spend by 18%. Derek got a congratulatory email from Victoria that was forwarded to the entire leadership team. His name appeared in the company newsletter. He was invited to present at an industry conference. My name appeared nowhere. But this time, I didn't feel defeated. I felt calm. Because I had documentation. Because I knew what was coming next. 3 weeks after Derek's boardroom presentation, the company announced a new performance review process. Leadership wanted to tie promotions and compensation directly to specific project contributions. They wanted clear ownership and accountability. They wanted to know exactly who was doing what. The announcement came through email, formal and corporate. Every employee would participate. Every project from the past year would be reviewed. Every team member would document their specific contributions. In the break room, people groaned about more paperwork. In the hallways, managers complained about administrative burden. Derek looked thrilled. He probably saw it as another opportunity to claim credit across multiple projects. I felt perfectly calm, because for the first time in years, I'd have an official platform to state exactly what I'd done, and I had every receipt to prove it. Derek submitted his performance review first, eager as always. Through the department's shared calendar, I could see when he'd scheduled his review meeting with Victoria and the HR director. I wasn't supposed to know what he said, but Brenda, who worked in an adjacent department, had a friend in HR who'd heard things. Derek had claimed primary responsibility for the client retention model. He'd described it as his initiative, developed under his strategic direction, executed by his team. He'd listed himself as the project lead, the primary contributor, the driving force. He'd positioned me as a supporting analyst, someone who'd helped with data entry and basic calculations. Data entry, basic calculations. 3 months of advanced statistical modeling reduced to clerical work. Overconfidence makes people sloppy. Derek had gotten so comfortable stealing credit that he'd stopped being careful. He'd overreached, claimed too much, made himself too central, and that created questions. 2 days after Derek's review, I received an email from Victoria's assistant. The CEO would like to meet with you regarding the Q3 performance review process. Please confirm your availability for Thursday at 2 p.m. My hands shook slightly as I typed my response. Confirmed. Thursday came. I arrived at Victoria's office 5 minutes early, carrying a slim folder. Inside was a printed summary, 1 page, clear and factual. Victoria's assistant gestured me inside. The office was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Victoria sat behind her desk reading something on her computer. "Anna," she said, looking up. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." I sat, folder in my lap, hands steady. "I wanted to speak with you about the client retention model," Victoria continued. Her tone was neutral, professional. "I need you to clarify your involvement in the project. Not defend, not explain. Clarify." The word choice was deliberate, careful. I opened my folder and slid the summary across her desk. "I developed the model from concept through implementation," I said evenly. "The initial framework, the risk assessment methodology, the variance calculations, and the validation process. Here's a timeline with supporting documentation." Victoria picked up the summary. Her eyes scanned the page quickly, efficiently. I continued. "I can provide version histories, email threads, and timestamps for every component. The original files are all in my authorship." I presented the complete framework to Derek on June 15th. The boardroom presentation happened June 27th. No emotion, no accusations, just facts with dates attached. Victoria set down the summary and looked at me directly. "Can you explain the risk model methodology right now? Without notes?" "Yes," and I did. For 15 minutes, I walked through the entire framework. The data sources, the statistical approach, the assumption validation process. The variance calculations Victoria had asked Derek about in the boardroom. I explained why I'd chosen certain methodologies over others, where I'd found gaps in standard industry models, how I'd adapted techniques from academic research. Victoria listened without interrupting. When I finished, Victoria was quiet for a moment. Then she asked 3 more technical questions, specific, detailed, testing. I answered all of them, clearly, confidently, because I'd built the model. I understood every component. I could explain it forward and backward, with or without notes. "Thank you," Victoria said finally. "I have everything I need." I stood to leave, but she held up one hand. "One more thing, Anna. Why didn't you speak up during the boardroom presentation?" The question hung between us, honest, direct. I met her eyes. Because I've learned that speaking up in moments like that makes women look difficult, unprofessional, like they can't be team players. I thought staying quiet and letting my work speak for itself was the right choice. "And now?" Victoria asked. "Now I think silence is just another form of permission." Victoria nodded slowly. "Thank you for your time." I left her office, my heart pounding, no idea what would happen next. For 3 days, nothing changed. Derek walked the halls with his usual confidence. Meetings continued. Projects moved forward. Then on Monday morning, Derek's calendar disappeared from the shared system. His name vanished from project assignments. His office door stayed closed. By Tuesday afternoon, his nameplate was gone. There was no announcement, no email, no department meeting. Derek Walsh simply stopped existing at Blackstone Analytics. Through the office grapevine, details emerged slowly. He'd been asked to resign, quietly, immediately, with a separation agreement that included strict non-disclosure terms. Multiple people came forward after my meeting with Victoria. Other analysts who'd had similar experiences. Patterns of credit theft across years. Documentation that corroborated everything. Arrogance doesn't fall with drama and spectacle. It collapses inward, silently, while everyone else keeps working. 2 weeks later, I was called back to Victoria's office. This time, the HR director was there too. And the head of analytics. "We'd like to offer you a promotion," Victoria said without preamble. "Senior Director of Strategic Analytics. It comes with a significant salary increase, expanded responsibilities, and a seat in executive planning meetings." The role Derek had been positioning himself for. The role he'd thought was his. "This isn't compensation for what happened," Victoria continued. "This is correction. You've been operating at this level for 2 years. Your work demonstrates the capacity. We should have recognized it sooner." I accepted. Not because it erased what had happened, but because I'd earned it, because competence deserved recognition, and silence had cost me enough. On my first day in the new role, I passed Derek's old office. The space had been cleaned out, walls bare, desk empty. A contractor was inside measuring for new furniture. I didn't stop to look, didn't pause for some dramatic moment of triumph. I walked past toward my new office, 2 doors down with windows facing east. Inside, I found a handwritten note on my desk from Victoria. "Looking forward to seeing what you build next." I sat down, opened my laptop, and got to work. Because the satisfaction wasn't in Derek's downfall. It was in finally being visible, in having my name attached to my work, in knowing that the next model I built would be credited correctly from the start. 3 months into my new role, I hired 2 junior analysts, both women, both brilliant, both hungry to prove themselves. I made them a promise on their first day. If you do the work, your name goes on it. Always. No exceptions. One of them, a young woman named Claire, asked quietly, "What if someone tries to take credit?" I met her eyes. "Then we document everything. We build evidence. And we speak up, because your work matters, and you deserve to be seen." She nodded, something shifting in her expression. Recognition. Relief. Understanding that she wouldn't have to fight alone. That's what changes culture. Not dramatic confrontations, not revenge, just consistently insisting that credit goes where it belongs, one project at a time, one person at a time. Sometimes I think about that boardroom meeting, about Victoria's question cutting through Derek's confidence, about how one moment of scrutiny unraveled months of deception. I don't know if Victoria suspected something before that meeting, or if Derek's vague answer raised red flags. I don't know if my documentation was the tipping point, or if others had been waiting for an opportunity to speak. I just know that silence protects the wrong people. Knowing your worth doesn't require revenge. It doesn't require drama or confrontation or burning bridges. It requires patience, documentation, and the willingness to speak truth when asked, because when truth speaks, it doesn't shout, it doesn't threaten, it doesn't need elaborate revenge plots. It simply answers one question clearly, completely, with receipts. And then it waits for justice to arrive, not because you demanded it, but because evidence doesn't lie, and neither should the people who create it.